My dad, Bill Harris, passed away a few days ago. So in remembering him, I put together this photographic slideshow made up from the photo albums that he saved over the years. So, you know what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's look at this, and I'll point out some of the highlights and experiences in my life with my dad. My dad really tried to be a good Christian. You can see here our family participated in Christian church there in Town Avenue in Pomona, California. My brother and I attended church camps, Christian church camps. My dad was on the board of directors of the Pacific Christian College, which is now this Hope International University. This was back in the 60s. So I really respected him for trying to be a good Christian and to have the love for God and good family values. I know it was difficult on him when I became a Sikh and joined the Sikh religion. I think that later in life, he was able to accept that I had adopted a new religion, because he found that the Sikh religion was based on some of the same values that the Christian beliefs are. Belief in one God, good family values, and honest living. In fact, I just want to read real quickly a quotation from my dad that I used in my book, this Confessions of an American Sikh. The quotation in the Los Angeles Times, this was from December 1982, when I was trying to join the U.S. Army as a Sikh. It says here, Khalsa's father, Bill Harris, said he still calls his son Clark, but supports his challenge to the Army's dress standards all the way, in quotations. We kind of grew apart a little at first, said Harris, a mobile home salesman. Now I'd say we have a good relationship. I picked up a book on different religions and realized it wasn't a weird scene. It wasn't a cult. Now I'm really proud. He lives a strict life with real quality moral people. Once you get by the long hair and beard and dress, you realize it's too bad we don't all stand for what they believe in, being honest, working hard, and especially defending our country. You're probably the best citizens we have. I'd rather have a dedicated soldier than worry about the length of beard or wearing a white turban. So this book is available on Amazon. I'd be happy to send you a copy as well for free if you just write me. And I'll put my email address there below. It gives a lot of the experiences with my dad. This was an article that was in the Progress Bulletin. It's 1964 with our family there, my dad and I. Old house on Roswell Street in Pomona, California. The Christmas there. My brother and I, Jim Harris, here. And the family portrait there. This was in the 1960s. You can see he had a really nice family life. My dad there. We're on a trip probably in the late 50s, as it looks like I was only about 1 or 2 years old there. This is our house on Virginia Road in Claremont, California. My brother and I, they're at my grandmother's house, which was actually in Pomona. And my dad was quite a salesman. He received a lot of awards from the Mobile Home Association that he was with. And this one, of course, shows how the salesman is selling an icebox to Eskimos. So he was quite proud of these awards and achievements in sales. And then, of course, the other big part of my dad's life was being at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked by the Japanese. He served on the USS Nevada. He has quite a few stories he told me about how they got up on deck and tried to shoot at the Japanese planes. But they didn't have the right type of gun. It was a 5-inch gun, and it wasn't sufficient for shooting at the Japanese planes. I think he also told me that they tried to use machine guns, but really they were not prepared for the Japanese attack, as we all know. But at least he had the courage that he got up on the deck and tried to do something about it. So let's look now at some of these photo albums. Get this camera here. These are some of the old photo albums that show a lot of my dad's life. And first look at, this was a letter that my grandmother evidently sent to my dad at Pearl Harbor just after the attack. And I think this is particularly historically significant. You can see here it was addressed to my dad, William C. Harris, at the USS Nevada, Honolulu, Hawaii. This was the day after the attack. She sent this from Leavenworth, Kansas, Tuesday, December 9th, 1941. Wow. And she talks about in the letter how she prays he's okay and how he should defend our country. Here's some other pictures of my dad shooting what looks like a Springfield 1903 rifle. And I really took up shooting myself. My dad taught us how to use safety with firearms, and I eventually tried out for the Olympics in 1984 for the small bore rifle team. Now this is pictures of my dad on the USS Nevada. You can see him here in the sitting position, shooting, and then looks like he's shooting a 45 caliber Colt 1911 model there. And he had some pictures of their invasion onto Saipan as well. That was really a bloody mess there. Tells me the story about how he jumped into a foxhole with his commanding officer. They were in that invasion of Saipan. And he said to his commanding officer, he said, "Wow, this is really hairy." And the machine gun fire was coming over their heads, and it was really a hairy situation. So the captain said, "Well, Bill, these are times you remember." That story has always stuck to my mind, how you can be courageous and learn from those experiences. These are pictures when my dad visited the Pearl Harbor. They had a reunion, evidently, in the early 90s of some of the survivors of the Pearl Harbor attack. And here's another interesting newspaper article. This looks like it was from Leavenworth, Kansas, and they were writing about how my grandmother, that was Mrs. Emma E. Harris, is expecting her son, Sergeant William C. Harris from Seattle, Washington. Sergeant Harris was in the midst of the December 7th attack on Pearl Harbor. He says he expects to return to Leavenworth about June 10th. He has been in the Marine Corps for 4 years, expects to remain in the Marine Service. That's interesting. And you can see also here pictures of him. My dad's on the extreme right there on this picture. He was in food service in the Marine Corps. Some more pictures here. There he is in his uniform. Now this is a picture from World War I. I'm not sure if my dad's father was in the Army or not, but that could be something to do with that. It says National Guard actually there in the background, Kansas City, Kansas. So maybe my grandfather was in the Army as well. This is a picture of my dad, young age. So here's some pictures here. This was these albums that I remember my dad showing me these albums when we were kids. You can see him there in Hawaii. This was before the attack, I believe. Enjoying the beach and oh, before I forget, this is a picture of General MacArthur inspecting the Marine troops, and looks like in Boston, Massachusetts, where my dad was assigned. And I'm not sure if he's in this picture or not, but it's a very interesting historical picture. There's my dad with my grandmother, probably on leave at one time. Some pictures of him growing up in Kansas, looks like. And then pictures with his sister, Novenel. She passed away a couple years ago, actually. Looking very smart there in his 1920s style suit. Dressed up in a cowboy outfit there. My dad grew up in the Depression, during the Depression, and it was pretty tough, what he told me. My grandmother had to sew clothing to make a living. My grandfather had tuberculosis, I believe, and he wasn't around much. He eventually passed away when my dad was young. There he is, dressed up as Santa Claus. And you probably saw in one of those other pictures, I don't know if I showed it actually yet, but he's dressed up as Santa Claus, and when we were young kids too. There was Novenel and my dad together in the snow there in Kansas. Again, there's Novenel and my dad. They were pretty close. Novenel lived in Southern California as well, and so they got together quite often, I believe. There's my dad with a rifle. I think it kind of runs in the family about proficiency with firearms, because I've really taken to practicing with rifles and firearms. As I said, I tried out for the Olympics a couple different times in shooting, and I'm still actively involved in target shooting. There they are with the chickens on the farm. I think they had a small acreage that they farmed there in Kansas, as I recall. We went to actually visit the house once. I think it was back in the 1960s in Leavenworth, Kansas, and it was still there in the 60s. I don't know if it's still there now. You can see the house there in the background. And this would be, I believe, my grandfather there. This is my grandmother with my dad, the young child. And that's the little house there, probably in the 1920s. So, look at some of these other albums here. This is in Hawaii again. These are colorized photographs. 1940, April 28th, 1940. So this was before the attack on Pearl Harbor. This is at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. You can see it there. Now if you go there, that Waikiki Beach, it's all built up. And the Royal Hawaiian's still there, but it's just dwarfed by all the massive hotels that are there now. Here's another album. This is entitled Hawaii. Maui. So my dad got around quite a bit there in Hawaii. These are all photographs from the 1930s and 40s, is the way it looks. Now I want to point out this letter I sent to my dad back in, this was February 12th, 1980, as you can see. And I was working for a congressman in Washington, D.C., so I had a flag flown over the Capitol, and I sent that back to my dad, and I wrote this note and letter to him about how I had always had good training from him, and hoped that I would be as courageous as he was when he was in the Marine Corps. As I said, he was there at that Pearl Harbor attack and also on the invasion of the Saipan. So these are some other pictures here. We visited, my wife and I visited the ancestral home of my grandmother in Buckfastleigh, England, a couple of years ago, and so we brought back photos and saw the little house where would be my great-grandmother was born in England. This is some other books about the Pearl Harbor attack that he got when at that memorial service there. Okay, well, thank you for your time. Hope you enjoyed this video, and